I finally made it to the bedroom that belonged to me and my wife, and that's where I found them. I carefully entered the room, holding my phone in my hands to film what I discovered. Continuing to move carefully, trying not to touch the evidence, I reached for the wallet, which was lying in my trousers on the floor. Opening it, I saw that the driver's license belonged to a certain Charles Thornton. Bree was dead, of course, as was her recent lover. I called 911, of course, identified myself, and summoned the nearest patrol car and my team to the scene of a suspected suspicious murder. They were supposed to arrive soon, but I first wanted to understand for myself what had happened. I tossed the wallet into the evidence bag I took from the trunk of my car before donning nitrile gloves and shoe covers and entering my former home. At that moment, I heard a voice that brought me out of my clinical analysis of the scene. "Captain Elliot, Captain?" I heard, and then the sound of vomiting caused by the stench coming from the open front door. I calmly went downstairs to meet Officer Joseph Lewis. "Hello, Joe." I got home and, well, I opened the front door, realized I could smell it, and walked back out. I started filming everything immediately after calling 911 and took my equipment. Upstairs, 2 dead, shot in the master bedroom. One of them is Bree. I tentatively identified the second one based on the ID in the wallet at the scene. This is one Charles Thornton. I called my team, but I can't investigate further since Bree is one of the dead. I think they've been dead for at least 24 hours, maybe up to 72. Considering I haven't been able to reach her for the last 2 days, I'm leaning towards it being closer to 72 hours. I took out another evidence bag. Speaking as calmly and focusedly as possible, I continued. I recorded a preliminary video from the scene without touching anything. Here's my phone. I'm handing it over to you along with the deceased's wallet as evidence. Once you accept them, I will draw my service weapon and hand it over as required by procedure. I want my team to take it from me personally. At this point, I stopped recording, put the phone in the bag, sealed it, and handed it to Joe. "Joe, I need a little time to come to my senses. You need to seal the house, check the car in the driveway, and wait." I walked up to my official car, took out my service pistol in a holster, and then just sat down on the curb. My team arrived about 10 minutes later, a little later than the second patrol car, which helped Joe seal the crime scene. When they got out of the van, I could see from their faces that they knew where they were. Hell, most of them have been here at least once in the last 6 months. And my team, they've all been here in the last year since we had our annual 4th of July celebration. Lieutenant Sharon Harper walked up to me while the other 4 stayed behind, unloading the van. "Captain? Rob? Is everything okay?" she asked. "No, Sharon, everything is not in order, but I know what needs to be done. Here is my service pistol and the keys to the official car. The luggage is still in the car. I have not unpacked it. There may be traces of gunpowder. I was at the shooting range in Atlanta. Officer Lewis has the video I recorded and the ID of one of the victims. I can confirm that the other one is probably my wife, Brianna Elliott. The man has apparent gunshot wounds, and the Bree." Here my voice broke for the first time. I couldn't determine where her injuries were due to the position of the bodies. "The master bedroom is upstairs at the end of the hallway on the left. I looked around the kitchen, but I didn't go into the other rooms, so you need to check everything. And Sharon, per protocol, I'm suspended and no longer handling this case. Now you're in charge. I need your gloves and shoe covers. And Rob, I'm so sorry." "I know, Sharon. Just find whoever did this, please." And with that, I finally broke down. Tears flowed in streams, salty and bitter. I grieved the loss of my wife, the destruction of our marriage, her untimely death, the fact that she seemed to have betrayed our vows. I grieved for them and grieved for myself, for the loss of the foundations that gave me strength in moments when the world turned out to be cruel, terrible, and unfair. I mourned my final loss of innocence. Most of my team didn't know how to approach me, so they just silently went about their work, step by step recording evidence, collecting evidence, examining, and trying to understand. As often happens, conversations about possible suspects inevitably came back to me. They knew that until I was removed from the list of suspects, I was the main candidate. The fact that I was at the Atlanta conference worked in my favor, but alibis are tricky things, and if anyone could falsify evidence, I was one of the few who could do it flawlessly. This fact made me the most important suspect, but also the most difficult to eliminate. How can they approach me? With awkwardness, restraint, caution after all, I am their leader and friend. I understood this. About half an hour later, Sharon came up to me. For the first time in many years, she addressed me not as a lieutenant to a captain, or even as a friend, but formally. "Mr. Elliot, I need to do a simple test." She began with the intonation that I myself taught her to use. "We need to do a gunshot test. This means that I will take swabs from your hands, forearms, and face. I will also need to take samples from your clothes. I can do part of the test here on site. You are not required to consent to this test, but refusal may be used against you in court, and a warrant may be obtained to order it. Do you agree with the test?" "Yes, I agree. I shot my last shot last night at Stoddard's Range and Guns in Atlanta. I haven't shot in these clothes, except for the boots, since they were last washed," I confirmed. "Thank you, Rob. Mr. Elliot, sorry, I know I have to do everything according to the regulations." I noticed she was wearing a chest cam that was recording our conversation. She then began taking swabs for testing, as well as samples from my shoes and shirt. It was strange to hear her call me Mr. Elliot rather than Captain Elliot or just Rob. More than an hour passed as a crowd of curious neighbors gathered behind police tape before my boss arrived. Commander Sean Hallowell was a tough man to outsiders, but could be kind and caring to his friends. I've known him since the day I joined the service, and for the last 12 years we've played golf at least once a month. He was my mentor for the first 3 years, and I wondered who he would be to me today. "Rob, I heard about the challenge. Are you okay?" he asked, answering my unspoken question. "I don't feel very good right now, Sean. I'm trying to hold on, but..." I fell silent without finishing. "You know all the procedures. You wrote some of them yourself and coached your team, so you're sure they're doing everything right. I want you to know that whatever you need other than discussing the investigation, I will do it for you. I can let you go if you want to leave." I chuckled, albeit bitterly, at his words. This is the biggest mistake I noticed. No one told me to stay put. I'll stay here until they're taken out, Sean. I know the rest of the procedure, and as soon as they are taken away, I will go to the station to give my testimony. You are on paid leave, of course, while the investigation is ongoing, and you will be removed from the case. When you get back, maybe you can work with me for a while until we find the culprit. I realized that this was one of those rare occasions when Sean spoke formally, but still as a friend. "I understand, Commander. Everything is according to the rules. And Sean, thank you. And Laura, too." His face softened, trying to understand the severity of what I was experiencing. Nodding, he silently left to talk to Sharon. I heard part of their conversation where he said that this case is now the top priority for my team, Sharon's team. The murder of a police captain's wife, even possibly an unfaithful one, is a major event for the department, with consequences at all levels. This concerned one of us. Perhaps unfaithful. That was the first time it occurred to me that maybe Bree wasn't a willing participant. This did not mean, of course, that she was not involved in what was happening immediately before her death. Bree was, and always had been, very responsive sexually, at least with me. But could it be coercion? And regardless of this, who killed them both and why? The only suspect the department had at the moment was me. I knew I hadn't done it, and I was sure that most of my team, my colleagues and friends, well, at least some of them, knew it too, at least deep down. But the heart does not always lead the mind. I had to be eliminated as a suspect, and then others had to be found. After some time, one of the patrol officers brought me a blanket. I lost track of time, caught up in my thoughts, emotions, and attempts at reasoning. I was starting to lose my temper due to stress, anger, and shock. Rationally, I understood that the blanket could have been brought earlier. Perhaps my position made them hesitate before approaching. Wrapped in a blanket, I finally felt the full weight of my losses. 2 hours later, I began to sob, grieving for my wife and what her death meant to me. I remember that by that time, the press had begun to arrive. I vaguely remember one of the reporters reporting live for the evening news. None of them were allowed to approach me while I continued my silent cry. Brianna Renee Humphreys and I met at a frat party in the fall of my senior year in college. She was a freshman, full of energy, with brown hair and bright green eyes. Her eyes, I was lost the moment I looked into them during our first dance. I knew I wanted to get to know this girl better. It wasn't love or passion at first sight, either for her or for me, but I was immediately carried away, and she felt a strong attraction. By the end of the evening, we had spent most of the time with each other at the party and agreed to meet the next day in the afternoon. I walked her to her dorm, and she gave me the first of many kisses goodbye. It was a non-binding gesture, and at the same time, a promise of everything. The next day, our date, which was supposed to end in the evening, lasted until late at night. The kiss that evening was the complete opposite of the first, long and passionate. It was a promise of everything without exception. From that moment on, we became a couple. Her Christmas gift to me was her pearl of priceless. For her birthday, I gave her the gift of meeting my parents. On our second Christmas, my gift to her was a 1.5-carat diamond engagement ring, which I presented to her on my knees in her parents' house. We got married in June, at the end of her third year. I have already graduated from the academy and started working. Although I was new to the police force, there were over 50 officers present at the wedding. Of course, the fact that my father was a retired police officer played a role, but I had already established myself at the academy and within the first few months of work. Everyone understood that my days in a patrol car were numbered and that a job in forensics awaited me. Bree graduated from college with a degree in business management, found a job, and experienced the stress of being the wife of a patrol officer. When I got promoted and transferred, she finally started to relax. After 6 months, I was told that I had to go back to university and get a master's degree in criminology in order to be able to advance in my career. If I don't do this, I'll remain a lieutenant forever. It took me 18 months. During this time, Bree was supportive, reliable, level-headed, and loving. When I needed to study, she provided peace and quiet. When I needed to talk, she was there. She was my support, my guiding light, my inspiration. I did what I did because that was my character. But I did it the way I did, thanks to her, because I wanted to see the pride in her eyes. I needed this validation of her love, her respect, her pride. The next decade went well. We both advanced our careers and spent time with each other. There were almost no man's nights or ladies' nights. Although I sometimes stopped on the way home to socialize with colleagues, it was at a bar near Bree's work. More often than not, in those first 10 years, when I said I would be at Martin's Corner, the cop bar, Bree would either already be there when I arrived or appear a few minutes later. My brothers and sisters in the service knew and loved Bree. Bree and I never had children. It turned into a joke. We tried to have a baby for 2 years until we got tested. As it turns out, a childhood illness made it impossible for me to become a father, and Bree had a rare combination of conditions that would cause her to get pregnant, but always lose the baby within a few weeks. We grieved for what would have been the perfect combination of the two of us for about a month, and then began to consider adoption. Another 10 years passed, and we were still thinking about this issue, realizing that if we wanted to do this, we needed to decide soon. Despite this, the loss only strengthened our bond, if that was even possible. I lived for her and my work. She seemed to live for me and her own. We lost our parents 2 years apart. My mother and father died in a botched carjacking, although the perpetrator did not survive. It was unclear whether he survived my father, who tried to protect my mother by drawing his Glock. More than 100 active police officers and perhaps as many retired ones attended the double funeral. It was a sea of blue. Bree's parents left much calmer. Bree's father already had stage 3 cancer when an MRI revealed a tumor in his brain, a year before my parents died. We helped her parents when we lost mine. Bree's father lived for 2 more years and her mother passed away a year after him. Blow after blow, like clockwork, over these 3 years. After this, Bree became closer to her only surviving relative, her sister. I distanced myself from my family, who for some reason was offended that I remained in the service after the death of my parents. She believed that if her father didn't have a gun, they could have survived. I believed that my father would not have been a father without him. In the 14th year of our marriage, childless, having lost both parents, I finally became a captain and took full charge of the forensic department. Over the next few years, I transformed our methods, procedures, and roles to better reflect the latest scientific advances. I trained my employees in classrooms, labs, training sessions, and crime scenes, hired the best and brightest, and developed personnel within the division. Over the next decade, I was the person in charge of complex crime scenes. Thanks to our work, 2 prisoners ended up on death row and hundreds of criminals were behind bars. Many families and victims were given the opportunity to close their wounds, and if I wanted to go higher in my career, the doors would be open. But I preferred to stay where I was. Bree's career path was different, but no less successful. She became a manager within her company, leading a team of 70 people at Johnson Services. Some years, thanks to bonuses, she earned more than me, which allowed us to see the world, go on vacation, and make plans for a wonderful retirement in 10 years. We visited Europe 5 times, South America once, Australia once, and Japan twice. I think we visited 41 states out of 50. Dink double income, no kids. When both spouses earn more than 6 figures, there is little money left over for fun. Our sex life was no longer 3 or 4 times a day, but after more than a quarter of a century of marriage, whose life is still like that. We still made love 2 to 3 times a week. Bree remained as desirable to me at 40 as she was at 18. I never cheated or even thought about it. Until the moment I looked into our bedroom, I would say that Bree was the same. But that was the past. Her life, my thoughts and memories. All I have left is to find a way forward, to get through each day. Although I had friends, losing Bree ended my family. I was left alone, absolutely alone. After 7 hours, 3 long hours of waiting and a change of duty, they were finally carried out. My thoughts were still focused on my loss, our love, possible betrayal. They were chaotic, no longer orderly, methodical questions and answers, procedures and tasks that usually occurred at a crime scene. Of course, almost every crime scene I had worked on up to this point had been foreign to me. But this place was private. It was my house, wrapped in tape, my yard and street. It was my wife. It was the most personal thing it could be. I stood up as they rolled them out. I watched as they were loaded into the van. I started walking towards the van, stopping halfway when my mind finally realized that I couldn't get any closer. I stood 10 feet away while Sharon led the team. I didn't know why she was giving instructions they knew what to do. Perhaps she did it for my sake, glancing at me before looking away during operations. She tried to bring me back to reality, to the familiar procedures that I knew so well. I don't think it helped, but I felt a little comforting support. As the van doors closed, that's when it hit me. There weren't many people I needed to call, but it had to be done. First, I called Bree's sister, Suzanne, avoiding giving too shocking details, but letting me know that Bree was gone. Then I called my sister Ellen and said the same thing. I answered 2 identical questions in the same way to both. No, I don't know when the funeral will be. No, I'm not fine, but somehow I'll cope. It sounded corny. Perhaps it was so. Finally, it was time to go on my own. Walking up to Sean, I simply said, "I'm ready." He nodded and called Jose Rentego to take me to the station and then to the Marriott downtown once we were done. The ride in the back seat was unpleasant. I've never ridden in the back seat of a patrol car. I made a mental note of this as something worth talking to Sean about in the future. Spouses are not always at fault, and it does not help justice if they are made to feel like criminals. I was taken to the 3rd room, which was the most comfortable. Detectives Brian Rosen and Bill Turner walked in 5 minutes later without keeping me waiting. I also knew that both of them should have finished their shift 3 hours ago. I felt better knowing that two of the department's best detectives were on the case. Although, yes, they questioned me as a suspect, I knew that they would find Bree's killer once they eliminated me from the list of suspects. Either Sean gave them the job, or they volunteered. Either way, I was grateful. Rosen turned on the recorder, then nodded at the camera. "This is being recorded. I'm with Captain Robert Elliott, and we're discussing the alleged murder of two people that Captain Elliott reported finding dead in his home. One of the victims has been identified as his wife, Brianna Elliott. The second victim is believed to be Charles Thornton. Captain Elliott, I need to tell you your rights," he said, "and then read me my Miranda rights." I refused a lawyer, and at that moment the door opened and a lieutenant from Internal Investigations entered. "Sorry for being late. I'm Lieutenant Robert Parker, Internal Affairs. I need to be present at this interrogation," he said. This surprised me. While Internal Affairs will, of course, follow a case in which the suspect is a significant member of the police force, I did not expect them to show up at the very first interrogation. But what difference did it make? "Captain Elliott, we need to establish a timeline of events. At the moment, we have preliminary information about the time and date of death. When was the last time you talked to your wife?" Brian began. "On Tuesday, around 22 o'clock, I called our home phone from my mobile phone. We talked for about half an hour, mostly discussing my day at the Forensics Symposium in Atlanta. I tried calling on Wednesday and Thursday around the same time in the evening, and also on Thursday morning around 8 o'clock, at noon, and again at 10 o'clock. I tried to call before boarding the plane this morning at 8 o'clock. I turned my phone over to the crime scene unit through Officer Joe Lewis. I also used it to take a brief video of the crime scene before the first patrol officers arrived," I replied. Parker's head shot up at this remark. "So you intervened at the crime scene before the forensic experts arrived?" he asked sharply. "It was my home, so there will inevitably be traces of my DNA there. I put on shoe covers and nitrile gloves and recorded from the moment I entered the building until the moment I handed the phone to Officer Lewis. The only intervention on my part was to carefully remove my wallet and ID from my trouser pocket, which were lying on the floor. So no, I didn't make any significant changes to the crime scene. Moreover, until I approached and saw the bodies, it was not obvious that this was a crime scene. Although the smell of death was palpable, it could have been an accident or natural causes." Parker looked incredulous, and Brian seemed annoyed. "But what was done was done. Are there people who can confirm that you have been in Atlanta without a break, or almost without a break, for the last 72 hours? Rosen continued, casting a sidelong glance at Parker, who clearly did not notice this. "Quite a lot during the daytime. There were between 20 and 30 people at the symposium, although you will have to check with them to see if there are any gaps. There were no breaks during the seminars. I have credit card records for food, but mostly I ate with colleagues from other police departments. Those lunches or dinners where I was alone are more interesting because that's when I tried to call my wife. I spent my evenings networking until 9 p.m. and slept alone from 11 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. every day, so I have no alibi for that time. You'll have to check the flights to see if it's possible that I could fly from Atlanta here, get home, and then fly back to Atlanta and be there again in the morning." I noticed Parker writing something down on a notepad. "So you have a window of about 11 o'clock, I continued. "But there are fixed takeoff and landing times for flights, and everything else is a flexible time frame. The shortest flight will take at least 2 to 3 hours one way. From home to the airport 40 minutes. You need to walk through the airport another 15 minutes. So if you add up the time in the air, on the ground, and preparation for flights, it's at least 9.5 hours. This is not yet taking into account the feasibility of walking through the Atlanta airport in 30 minutes. You are trying too hard to convince us of your innocence, Captain Elliott." Parker began. "This is Captain Elliott, Lieutenant Parker." Rosen interrupted him sharply. "And why, if you don't mind, are you interfering in our interrogation?" Rosen stared at Parker with obvious irritation. Parker did not answer immediately, but apparently did not find anything to object to. After a second, he closed the notebook, stood up, and left the room. We heard the observation room door slam behind him. It was not very professional. "Captain, sorry about that," Brian said and continued, "Did you know or hear anything about Charles Thornton before you found him in your bedroom?" "No, and I had not the slightest reason to suspect anything bad in my relationship with my wife, if you want to ask about it. I, I still find it hard to believe that she could cheat on me, even after what I saw with my own eyes. It was difficult for me to say these words," I continued, "but I have to be honest. Being on duty often ruins relationships. The stress of having your partner always in danger, the long hours of work, the exhaustion of constantly having to deal with the darkness in people. Some people have a blank look, as if they have seen too much evil in their lives. But Bree and I went through these stages a long time ago, and it only brought us closer. We were each other's support, our pillars. She was my strength, and now she's gone." I started to struggle again. For the first time since I was a newbie, my body began to shake from the adrenaline rush. I, I don't think I can help you anymore today, detectives. I think I need to go to the hotel. I know that you can't leave the city. Officer Rentego is to take me to the Marriott, as he was ordered by Commander Hallowell, when we're done. I will try to be back by 9:30 am unless you leave other instructions at the hotel. Will that suit you?" I could barely hold on, but I tried not to lose my dignity in front of the officers. Rosen and Turner saw it. You saw my struggle. I knew they understood. "This interrogation has stopped," Rosen said, standing up. "Captain. Rob, do you need anything for the night? Do you want an officer nearby? We can accommodate someone in the next room. I would stay myself, but I think I'd better spend my energy finding your wife's killer," Bill interjected. I shook my head, indicating that I did not need an escort. Then he stood up and shook hands with both detectives. I saw sympathy in their eyes. I was one of them, and it hurt them too. Their wives were undoubtedly worried now. I remember only fragments of the road to the Marriott. Impressions are all that remains. Memories of a hotel room, trying to rest. But I'm not sure I rested. Perhaps he was simply lying on the bed, absorbed in his loss. The only thing I remember clearly was the call at about 8 in the morning. Turner called to say that they did not need a formal interview, but would like to talk informally. We agreed to meet at noon at Eggy's Diner on Lakeshore. I thought about it for a while and then called my local funeral home. I knew I had to start preparing, even though I had no idea of the time frame or when Bree's body would be allowed to be retrieved. It was heartbreaking when we had to make an appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, I just waited for lunch, my first meal since eating a handful of nuts on the plane. I arrived a little before noon, but Brian and Bill were already there, at the table with 3 cups of coffee. As soon as I sat down, Bill immediately began. "Captain, I did some research to find out why Internal Affairs intervened so early in such a sensitive case where there was no hint of a problem. This is one of the strange aspects of the case, and I needed to understand what was behind it. Something is wrong here, something serious. It's definitely not routine, you know that. Someone at Aya is actively putting pressure on you. Someone wants to pin you down. There is already discussion about trying to suspend you for going into the house after calling 911. It didn't make sense, and I thought about it while the waitress took our order. My reputation has been impeccable. I have never broken the rules and only occasionally slightly bent them throughout my career. If someone at the top was against me, it was definitely not because I did anything wrong. It must be because I did something right. I shared this thought with 2 people immediately after the waitress took our order. Brian pondered this for several minutes before finally speaking. 9 rounds of .40 Smith & Wesson ammunition were fired. We found all the bullets either in the bed or in the floor under the bed. At least 3 shots were fired from the doorway, and at least 1 was fired from the end of the bed. These were .40s and W cartridges. I load these into my service pistol. Bill too. Me too. Heck, almost the entire department uses this ammo. This is a standard caliber. Exactly. If you relate this to what you just said, then maybe it's not that you did anything wrong. Maybe it's because you did something right. something that someone didn't want you to do. I saw Brian's thoughts swirling around in his head, how he pulled a thread, not knowing where it would lead, but realizing that it was important. But you're wrong about one thing. Homeland Security had its eye on you even before the murders. That's why they were in the interrogation room. You've already been watched. I don't know what exactly they're investigating, but you were already under suspicion. Strangely, I heard from Homeland Security that you had an alibi, and they confirmed it before we could even start checking it. I thought about it. Not only are they investigating me, but they must have been watching me in Atlanta. They already knew that I had not left the hotel. They already knew, Brian confirmed. That removes you from the list of prime suspects, and that's why we're talking now. But you're still on the list of persons of interest. This raises the question, why are you being investigated? When did this investigation begin? Sorry to be blunt, Rob, but what the hell is going on? I was stunned. I'm an honest cop. I worked on my reputation, both at work and in my personal life. I tried to set a good example for my colleagues and always seek justice for victims, close cases, and help families. And now someone thinks that I am dishonest, or wants me to look like that. My analytical, cool part of my mind returned. The first obvious step for you is to find out why I'm being investigated. I began to think out loud. The second is to understand whether this is somehow connected with the double murder. I have an alibi, confirmed by the most suspicious people. That's a pretty strong alibi, I would guess. And I paused for a second, realizing, you've already crossed the line by telling me all this. If they're investigating me, they're probably already tapping my phone and checking everything they can. They could search my desk, locker, car, luggage, and home. I shouldn't know about this. It could ruin your investigation, and it would definitely interfere with their work if I'm really guilty. So why are you telling me this? Brian looked away and Bill stared at the table. Finally, Bill couldn't stand it anymore. Because there is a rumor that a closed search was carried out at your house on Thursday. It took a second to realize this. What did you just say? I shouted, jumping to my feet. Brian immediately sat me back down. Quiet, Rob, calm down. Trembling with rage, I could barely control myself. Someone was in my house after the murder. Someone conducted a search. Someone left the bodies of my wife and her lover in the bedroom for me to find the next day. What the hell is going on here? Cops don't work like that. We don't go to a murder scene, search it, and then leave the bodies. This goes against every principle of being a good cop. It's just a rumor, Rob. Just a rumor. And believe me, you are not the only one who is outraged that this rumor even appeared. But here's what's strange. This rumor arose even before you reported what happened yesterday. This doesn't make sense at all. But .40 Smith and Wesson cartridges. The thing, such as it is, stinks. And you know what? I've known you too long, Captain. As far as I know, you're a damn scout. So I have to ask. Just between the three of us, is there something we should know, even unofficially? This investigation is going to be shit, hot and steaming, and it's on our shoulders. People in the department will be under attack if this rumor turns out to be true, and one of them could be you, and I don't want to be a pawn in this game. So, Rob, talk to me. Talk to us. Bill pointed at Brian. I don't know how long we looked at each other before my rage began to subside. 1 minute, 3, 5. I know for a fact that the food arrived before I could begin to think clearly and rationally again. Some bastard left my wife there. Some bastard wanted me to see this. It was more important to them than my wife's dignity then, than being a damn human being. I rarely sweat. This was not unheard of, but throughout my career, I tried to keep my mouth in check so that families around me would not doubt that I was calm and committed to justice. I took a deep breath. He exhaled. I inhaled again. I don't have anything specific. Bree, my wife, has been a little distant lately. About 5 or 6 months ago, we started talking about adoption again. Bree didn't explain why it became a thing again, but it was about 2 months after Johnson died when she became moody. I think she's starting to feel that stress again. I haven't worked on the streets for over 15 years now, and it wasn't easy for her then, but she held on. Then she had parents, and now, well, she has a sister who lives in Cleveland, and I. If something happens to me, then that's it, that's her life. I think she thought about it because we always said adoption was possible, and she was afraid of being alone. I had almost decided that if she was still serious, we would start the process by the end of the summer. But I didn't tell her about it. I wanted to see how she would feel when things calmed down again. And now it's too late. Brian asked the question confusedly. Did you? Did you suspect that she might be cheating? Did you have any guesses? I, I don't know if she cheated. All I know is that it could have been blackmail or against the will, but guesswork, only that she was gloomy and distant. But this can be explained by many reasons, and the most obvious is stress due to the situation, and not that she could cheat on me or was preparing for this. And no, I have no idea who Thornton is. Never heard of him. I was hoping they would share the news, but all I got was a him from Bill. Charles Thornton remained as much of a mystery to me as when I first saw his ID. They looked at each other and began to eat, while my thoughts about our conversation and the mysteries of this matter enveloped me like a heavy black coat. All this reeked of corruption, betrayal, infidelity, murder. Somehow, I didn't know how, but I knew for sure that it was all connected. Homeland Security investigation, murders, Bree's aloofness, an unusual search, probably bordering on legality. Thornton. These were all pieces of a puzzle that someone didn't want us to solve. It was a puzzle that many of those who knew and respected me desperately wanted to solve for me, for themselves, for all of us. Something was wrong in the department. Something was very, very wrong. And it all swirled around me like the eye of a storm, protecting me for the moment, but threatening disaster if I made the wrong move. Now I had something to hold on to, something that could help me cope with the pain. In that same diner, I greedily attacked the food like a hungry man. Later that evening, I started work. I went online trying to find out everything I could about the late Mr. Thornton. Without the department's resources, my options were limited, but I could call on a couple of ex-cops who were now private investigators to help. I could rarely involve them in official matters, but this was not official business. I was removed from the case, prohibited from working on it, and put on paid leave. My search was pretty simple. Thornton was a local resident who owned and operated a clothing store at Ford City Mall. And that's all. I could not find information about his marital status, age, although I knew from his ID that he was several years younger than me, income, or address. I couldn't find anything specific. So I called perhaps my only real friend, Larry Edwards, one of those ex-cops turned private investigators. After giving him all the information I had, Larry agreed to meet me the next morning, Sunday, at Stella's Diner. In the meantime, all I could do was dive back into my thoughts. The night was strange. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to be among people. But at the same time, I felt anxious and restless when thinking about other people. I made the initial arrangements for Bree's funeral, awaiting permission to release the body and setting a date. I called her office, leaving a message about what happened. I even went out to buy clean underwear, only to return to the Marriott Hotel to find that my luggage had already been emptied and delivered to the hotel an hour before my return. But that night I couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, couldn't think. I needed noise, but I craved silence. I needed a job, and I started working. If I couldn't do forensics, I could at least investigate what I knew. I started looking at our bank statements, credit card statements, cell phone and landline call records. I knew I wouldn't be the only one studying these notes, but I needed something to focus on. The question I needed to answer was, how was Charles Thornton related to Bree? I found my first clue on my credit card statement. 8 months ago, there was a transaction for $237.64 at a store operated by Thornton. Bree was not a clothing person, although she did like to dress well and would occasionally buy new outfits. I didn't remember any new clothes bought at that time, but I didn't pay attention to it. 2 days later, Thornton was buried. Bree likely bought clothes for Johnson's funeral that day. This is most likely how she first met Charles Thornton. The next morning, I arrived at Stella's diner. Early last night's lunch had been my only meal since Friday morning. I had just placed my order gypsy and black coffee when Larry arrived. After hearing my order, he asked for a hobo and some coffee before sitting down at the table. "Did you hear me? You always drink black coffee," Larry tried to joke. "And you always said before that you love your coffee light and Colombian, like your women. But black coffee is not racist, and you know it," I replied with a slight grin. His half-smile quickly gave way to an expression of concern. "Rob, are you coping? Your situation seems to have hit the entire department harder than anything in years. All my contacts say that this is now the main case that the department is working on, and you're just distant. My team, Sharon Harper's team, is doing this. They were the ones doing the forensics on Friday. That's why it's difficult for me. Most of the people I could reach out to or the work I could do. None of that is available to me right now. So no, I'm not holding up very well. I think I'm too stuck in my thoughts." The coffee was brought, and there was silence for a while. Larry put too much sweetener in his coffee, and I just stared at my mug before pouring myself a cup of coffee from the pitcher the waitress left behind. After a moment, Larry sighed, took out his phone, and began searching for a contact. "Listen, I want you to call her. This is my psychiatrist, so she is under medical confidentiality. I think you need to talk to someone. The problem is that I don't want you to talk to me. We can chat, of course, but I might be forced to repeat everything you say. So if you need help figuring something out, I'll help. I'll buy you a beer. I'll do whatever it takes. But whatever happens, it has to be a one-way conversation, okay? Call her." Larry wrote the information on a napkin. It was inconvenient without a mobile phone. "And, for God's sake, buy yourself a phone until you get yours back. I may need to call you. Many of your friends are worried about you." I smiled softly at my old friend. Larry and I had been friends since childhood, even though sometimes it seemed unlikely. We always played on opposite teams in baseball and school in our youth. His father, a fireman, and my father, a cop, had been friends since they were young, back in the 1960s, and Larry and I naturally became buddies. And now Larry was helping me get through the hardest moment of my life. "What could you find out from me?" I asked carefully. "An investigation is underway against you. I don't know why, but it is there. Someone is trying hard to separate this investigation from the investigation into Bree's murder. No one understands why, but the team investigating you has been told not to cooperate with the team investigating the murders. I was even able to get a little closer to the big picture, at least as I see it. I talked to Bill Turner and told him who to talk to get around this barrier. Brian Rosen and Bill Turner had lunch with me yesterday. They had heard about the investigation but didn't know the details. Only that someone searched my house on Thursday with a warrant. Bree and Thornton had been dead since at least Thursday morning and most likely Wednesday evening. Lord Jesus, are you saying? Larry cut himself off. I nodded. Yes, I was not the first to find the bodies, but whoever found them left them for me the next day. Let this stay between us. Any idea what they were looking for? Larry asked, but immediately answered, "Don't answer. I don't want to know." "I don't have the slightest idea," I said. "Fine. Then here's what I learned. Thornton owned and was manager of a women's clothing store in Ford City Mall. Thornton's business was successful, but he lived much better than one might have expected. He had a studio apartment at Aqua on Lakeshore and a nice place in Streeterville. How a clothing store manager could afford to live in Streeterville and Aqua, I don't know. And this despite the fact that he paid alimony to his ex-wife and supported 2 children. He had money. Inheritance? I suggested. No. Presumably a self-made man. Perhaps an emphasis on the word made, Larry noted. Are there any known connections? I haven't found one yet, but if he and Bree were lovers, that could explain both parts of what's going on. You could be blackmailed, and Bree could just be innocent. Well, not entirely innocent, but a victim of the end of Thornton's employment contract. I thought about it. This didn't quite explain why Bree was with Thornton, but it could shed light on the motive for her murder. If this is true, then who was involved with him, besides the obvious? I was hurt by the involuntary pun. And maybe that's the real reason for the search warrant. Not sure. As for who, I have a few questions for old acquaintances. No one has given me answers yet. But I also talked to you and my friends in the police. You won't get anywhere with a direct approach. I think Rosen and Turner want you to help, but, well, you know they can't afford it. But that doesn't mean I can't have a couple of beers with Brian and Bill. If we happen to talk business over a glass, well, internal investigations won't be able to do anything to do with it, at least directly. But you're radioactive. This is the first real news I've heard. Thanks, Larry. You're welcome. I'll keep working on it as long as I can. How much do I owe you? We still haven't agreed on a price, I asked. Let's see, you pay the bill here, and every time we meet. And at the end of the day, we go to Gibson's Steakhouse. We'll get a few guys together, open a couple bottles of bourbon from the bar, and you pay for the steaks and the booze. It's a lot less than I charge for any other business, but for you. Maybe I should pay for the drinks, then we'll be almost even, but you still pay for the steaks. Larry laughed. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing the news, or rather, the news from Larry's life. It was obvious to me that I was in a difficult period, and I was in a bad mood. Larry didn't seem to care. He probably saw it as a challenge to try and bring some light into my day and thoughts. At the end, I paid the bill, we shook hands, and as we were about to leave, Larry grabbed the napkin I had left on the table. Call her. If not, I might have to charge full price, and if so, you'll definitely need it. I put the napkin in my pocket. I walked across Broadway to CVS, a block and a half away, and bought a cheap phone. I didn't know how long I would need it, but I knew that I definitely needed it now. After activation, I immediately sent Larry the number. After some thought, I also sent it to Brian and Bill. If they want or need to contact me, they will have the opportunity to do so until my phone is returned. Thinking about this, I realized that I made a mistake by giving away my phone. I didn't know about the internal affairs investigation at the time. Therefore, handing over the phone was simple. They would carry out a routine check and take a video. The video was the only important evidence, or rather a report of what I observed. I expected the phone to be returned today. However, the investigation is different. Now that they have it, the IA internal department is unlikely to want to give it back. If I'm a suspect, they can get a search warrant. Even if not, they will want to keep it just in case. I called an Uber and drove to Ford City Mall to see what I could find there. I was looking through the list of stores when I heard it. You shouldn't be here, Rob. Go back to your hotel. We'll handle it for you. I instantly recognized Sean's voice. I turned and looked at him. What are you dealing with, Sean? What exactly? I heard that a case was opened against me. I heard that my house was searched on Thursday. Sean's eyes widened at these words. Heard. Yes, you heard. And I heard. That's why you can't be here. I was hoping you didn't hear those rumors. It's bad. It reflects badly on the entire department. Sighing, he lowered his head. Okay, let's go, Rob. I think I should buy you breakfast. I was just at Stella's. I looked at him with a dead gaze while I spoke. Okay, then how about lunch? Let's go to Potbelly or something. It's too early for lunch, I replied, watching him fidget. Damn it, Rob. Let me buy you a coffee and we can sit for a few minutes. I gave him a chance. Lead. We found ourselves in the food court with 2 cups of the best Colombian coffee from McDonald's. While I waited for the coffee to cool, I stared at Sean. After a moment, he looked away. I don't know all the details. All I know is this. When Johnson was shot, the authorities literally went crazy. They call us the murder capital, and we couldn't even protect our own. The guy, he was a nobody, a dead end. But that illegal substance that he had, it was not an ordinary product. Many believed that it was all about a prohibited substance, especially at the top. So the control received carte blanche to take on the dealers, but first of all, on the dealers, Suppliers. Was Thornton involved? At what level? Both, but secretly. He worked only with certain clients and then transferred the goods to his dealers for distribution. His store and the Ford City Mall seems like an odd place to sell this stuff. Not only that, we think that he supplied certain substances through the store, but only to a select few. We also suspect that he may have tried to drug people directly from the store. He gave them, perhaps with their consent, and possibly without. Bree, after Johnson died, she bought clothes from his store. I realized. Nobody knows for sure. Thornton wasn't on the radar when Johnson was killed. We didn't find out about him until 4 or 5 months later. But yeah, the wife of the head of the forensic department, that would be a major victory if he could control you through. He provided her with everything she needed. She could somehow extract information from you or force you to follow his lead. That doesn't explain sex. When they reached out to Thornton, "I'm sorry, Rob." By then they were. It was too late to stop her from getting involved with him. We don't know when or how it started, but she was at least dating him 3 times a week for the last 4 months. I looked at him, and the world collapsed around me again. Bree deliberately cheated on me. This went on for months. It wasn't violence. It wasn't an accidental mistake. She was stabbing me in the back, and now in my heart. But at the same time, all this time she begged me to agree to adoption. Of course, she may have been forced first, but she could have come to me. Rob, I don't want this to come between us, but I have to ask, how is your friend first of all? Are you clean? Are you not involved in this yourself? I looked at him gloomily and saw how he cowered, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sight of pain in my eyes. The first thing that bothered me was that I couldn't reach Bree while I was in Atlanta. Everything else, you know more than I do, which leads to the question. I suddenly became angry. When exactly did you find out this information? Last night, I swear, Rob. They filled me in last night. I shouldn't have talked to you in the first place. It would cost me early retirement. But they only told me last night. Who then left Bree and Thornton for me to find? I don't know. I was shocked when it came out. It was missed, but I got them to come back to it, forcing them to admit that they saw the bodies on Thursday. Damn it, Capone still owns the city. Who brought you up to speed? Rob, calm down a little, calm down. This was organized from the commissioner's office. The lieutenant from the internal department. Parker, I interrupted. Yes, Parker. He led the briefing. The commissioner himself was present. Have Rosen and Turner been brought up to date? I asked. No, I asked to include them in the course of the matter. Parker said that it was not time yet, that they could always be introduced later. The commissioner agreed. Rob, this conversation could cost me my career. I will definitely not rise through the ranks again. I looked around as he said this and noticed that at least 2 people were showing interest in 2 old friends sharing a cup of coffee. Anyway, you need to stay away. Someone is very much against you. Someone is trying to make you out to be the boss in this story. And you need to be careful because... Sean looked around. Because I think someone up there is involved. I have no proof, just a feeling. My gut tells me that not only has someone crossed the line, but they're not even in the same area where the line was. I saw seriousness and concern in his eyes. Whatever you do, you have to protect yourself. You have to stay away. Would you have been able to? You would have been able to stay away if it was Laura and not Bree who died, I asked, hinting at his wife. His wince at the thought answered my question before he stood up. Do what you have to do, Rob. I can't stop you. But I have to tell you, as your boss, as your friend, stay away. You might not like what you find, and you're only setting yourself up at even greater risk. He looked at me for a few seconds before walking away. I watched him leave and picked up my coffee, thinking about what Sean and Larry had said. Then I took out my phone and took out a tissue. Dr. Claire Mather's secretary, how may I help you? A cheerful voice sounded at the other end of the line. I need to make an appointment ASAP, and one of my friends demanded that I attend. So, I was quickly connected to a scheduler and got an early appointment the next morning. Taking the empty cup and cold coffee that Sean had left, I went to the trash can to throw them away when I felt someone's presence behind me. "I was told to give you a message," said a male voice behind me, simultaneously pressing me against the trash can, preventing me from turning around easily. "You're too nosy, and you should be focusing on your wife's funeral. I'm sorry for your loss, but in this town, losses happen. Do you understand me?" I felt the pressure disappear and heard footsteps moving away. I turned around to see the back of a man, possibly Hispanic, about 5'10", medium build, wearing trousers and a t-shirt, walking away. I quickly took a photo, mostly of his back, but some of his face, and sent it to Larry, then called him, but it went to voicemail. Larry, the guy in the photo, just tried to convince me to leave it as is, and made a veiled hint that something might happen to me too if I continue. Can you follow up on this tip? From there, I returned to the hotel and waited for a response from Larry. It never arrived, except for a short text. "Oi, be strong." Small consolation, but sometimes time takes time. The next morning was dark and gloomy. The most obvious fact was that the woman I loved, who I lived for, who was my other half and whom I trusted unconditionally, was dead and cheating on me. She and her lover were killed in an act of treason in the most sacred place of our shared world. I can never live in this house again. It was still difficult for me to realize this and remain calm. Part of me wanted to go to management and start tearing the building and people apart to find out who was involved at the top. And why? Why me? Why Bree? Why did we turn out to be so insignificant in the eyes of someone who swore to protect this city and its inhabitants? Why was money more important? After breakfast, I took the L train to Dr. Claire Mather's office downtown. I arrived almost an hour before the appointed time, glanced at the magazines in the reception area, but did not take one. I did not watch TV, as many did, and did not bury my head in my phone. I just sat there, not taking my eyes off the administrator. After some time, the clearly nervous woman got up and found something to do somewhere else in the office, away from my gloomy gaze, leaving me alone with my gloomy thoughts. Dr. Claire Mathers turned out to be a 5'5" tall woman with golden hair and blue eyes. She appeared to be about 40, slim, and dressed in a formal dark blue suit with a pale yellow blouse. Her mid-length skirt was paired with high-quality stockings or tights, and the look was completed with closed, low-heeled shoes. Her jewelry was minimal: small pearl earrings, a thin gold chain around her neck, and a small silver leaf brooch on her lapel. I noticed a wedding ring on her right hand, which probably indicated that she was a widow. Her features were pleasant, her skin smooth, and her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, as Bree called it. The glasses added to her professional charm and inspired confidence. "Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Mathers, but you can call me Dr. Claire or just Claire, whichever you prefer. I'm sorry for your loss, but if you'd like to come into the office, we can discuss how to deal with your grief and anger and move on." "Can I call you Rob?" she said softly. Her voice, reminiscent of sweet honey, increased my positive impression of her. "Yes, I'm Captain Rob Elliott of the Chicago PD Forensic Science Division. Yes, you can call me Rob. I'm your client for 9M. I added, realizing how stupid that last sentence sounded, since she already knew who I was and that it was I who had an appointment. She smiled slightly and turned to lead me into her office. Upon entering, I looked around the office. There was a large table with a comfortable chair against the wall. On the other wall, a pair of leather chairs sat opposite a table. Behind the table was a bookcase filled with books. A classic soft sofa couch was located diagonally to one of the armchairs against the wall. Next to him stood a small table with a lamp and a box of tissues. Next to the door was a folding table with several chairs and a box of toys. All this corresponded to the classic idea of a psychiatrist's office. After looking around the room, I walked over and sat down in a chair next to a small table. "Do you evaluate your patients' reactions before the session begins?" I asked. Smiling, Claire walked to her desk and sat down in a high-backed chair. Yes, in fact it is. Some patients expect or prefer the classic couch option. If you had chosen that, I would have taken a notepad. She picked up a notepad from her desk and sat in the chair that they had chosen. If you sat at the folding table, I would sit in one of the other chairs, either next to you if you sat facing the wall, or opposite if you chose a different direction. And if you chose this chair, she pointed to the second leather chair, I would take where you are sitting. But I think you knew that. You glance around the room, pause, and then choose. You knew which chair I would choose depending on your choice, didn't you? But this choice also became the first opportunity to diffuse the situation between us. You made a choice about what format of relations we face, and a choice. It's the first step to healing. It allows people to start taking control of their lives when they feel out of control. I get it. Her smile told me that she liked how I captured the essence of her process. Rob, I usually record these sessions for personal analysis, to take notes, or, on rare occasions, to consult with someone. Are you comfortable with this? I understand that in your case, the case of the death of your wife, it is a high-profile case. I saw the report on Friday evening. Is it acceptable, or is it better to conduct sessions without recording? Keep in mind that even if someone tries to obtain the recordings through a warrant. No, I think you're right about not recording them. There are several facts that you don't know yet that make recording dangerous. She looked at me with interest and made sure that there was no recording. You understand that I cannot report the crimes you admit here. Not about my crimes, just about what's going on in the Chicago PD. But what's new, right? Rochelle Jackson, Hellman Square, Finnegan, Zuley, Van Dyke. Our police force hasn't always been exemplary. For each conscientious cop, we have one of these for the last 20 years, and the murder of my wife. Even if it is not outright dirt, the way it is investigated will become a big stain. I began to tell my story about grief, death, shock. My story is about how my personal and professional happiness ended, and maybe my life itself, both personal and professional. We talked. Or rather, I did most of the talking. It turned out that once I opened the tap, I couldn't stop. Only the second person in my life that I couldn't hold my thoughts in front of. I told her about my conclusions, my fears, my shattered dreams, and I cried. For the last 10 minutes of our meeting, I could probably do nothing but cry. At some point, Claire stood up, picked up a box of tissues, and knelt down next to me. But time passes, and the session is over. Although I was just beginning to feel the next stage of grief, I knew I would need more help. And Claire, just by listening and being there for me, helped me. I didn't need any reassurance or advice, not yet. I just needed to let out my emotions, and she gave me that opportunity. So I made another appointment for the next day. Day after day is the key phrase. As I was leaving the office building, walking aimlessly, my new phone rang. It was strange. The number was familiar, but I did not give it to anyone after changing the number. Sharon, how did you get my new number? I asked. Larry Edwards said that we need to meet. He gave me the number. I need you to meet me at the Red Line, Clark Division Station to 95th, 3:43 p.m., second car. Today. And with that, she hung up. Although I was anxious, waiting 4 hours in the city center was difficult. Several times I felt like I was being watched. Several times my internal danger indicators sounded the alarm, but nothing happened. I came to the meeting. She sat on a bench, looking bored into space, at least to those who didn't know her. To me, she looked like a tiger about to break out of its cage, or a cobra about to strike. I sat down next to her. Sharon, I started, but her look silenced me. The next station was approaching, and she stood up. As she did this, she handed me a brown envelope from her bag. As she left, she whispered, "Be careful with this," and she left the carriage. I realized that she felt like we might be being watched, but for the first time in a long time, I felt clean, without a tail or surveillance. I took a moment to look at the folder. Toxicological analysis revealed a specific formula of illegal substances in Bree's system, the same one that was known as Thornton's product, in quantities indicating that he had given it to her shortly before his death. Death for Bree came instantly. Thornton was killed in much the same way. Clear shots, 2 kills. An additional 4 shots were fired after death, unnecessary control shots. Ballistic tests on the bullets linked the weapon to 3 other murders in the past 5 months. We were dealing with an efficient, highly professional, but stupid killer. Stupid because he was still carrying a weapon connected to 5 murders, one of which was highly publicized. A talented, selfish, or stupid criminal. I barely made it to Roosevelt, but knew I needed privacy to call Larry. I found a quiet place near the side of the building and dialed his number. "Rob, what's happened?" Larry answered. "I found something. I'm not sure if it'll be useful. I'm near Roosevelt Station. When and where can we meet?" I asked, turning around as a man walked staggering past me. "Well, I know a guy who always pays my bill." Larry started, but I sensed it. I heard Larry stop talking, and his voice carried over as the man walked away at a brisk pace. I heard the screams of passers-by, and Larry's voice continued to repeat. "What was that, Rob? Are you okay? Rob? Rob?" And then I heard only silence, until I began to distinguish the uniform squeak-squeak of the equipment in the hospital. I later learned that Larry was the first person to call 911 and the only one to report that a police officer had been hurt. Patrol officers are usually the first to respond to a call, but someone set a speed record when they received a report of an injured officer. A couple of patrolmen were the ones who helped. Larry's call ensured their quick arrival. Thanks to them and the paramedics, I stayed alive and was taken to the hospital. I guess, looking back, I owe Larry more than just free steaks. I ended up spending the next 3 weeks in the hospital at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The hospital was a turning point. I woke up 3 days after I was shot, handcuffed. This says a lot about how absurd the situation has become. My wife was killed, an attempt was made on my life, and I am the main suspect. Could it get any more ridiculous? 2 hours after I regained consciousness, Parker appeared and finally took his place on my list. He stood and looked at me while the duty officer at the door listened. "It seems the man you hired to kill your wife and her lover decided you were behind on your payment. Even used the same weapon. If I had had my service weapon, I might actually have become a strong murder suspect at that point. Was this revenge from your partners? We have everything you need. Sign the confession and let the police and the city move on. Fuck you, Parker. I'll find who killed Bree. And I'll hang your ass on a cross in Dolly Square for this nonsense of leaving their bodies where they were after the search." I pressed the button to call the nurse, but even when I did this, she was already entering the room. "Get him out of my room," I told the nurse. With one last look and grin, Parker walked out before she kicked him out. I relied on Larry during my hospital stay, 3 long weeks of hospitalization with physical therapy starting 3 days after I regained consciousness. Always, during the first week, a young police officer stood outside the door or walked beside me, handcuffing me to the walker, much to the dismay of the doctors and physical therapist. The only reason Larry was allowed to see me was because there were no other loved ones. He was my emergency contact after Bree, and even then it took calls from Sean. On Tuesday, 10 days after I woke up, Bree was buried. From the photographs, it seemed that a quarter of the entire police department had attended the funeral, a sea of black wool and blue shirts. One of the police officers guarding me arranged for me to watch live. I was even allowed to call Sean and briefly thank my friends in the department for honoring my wife as the spouse of a police officer, one of the most difficult roles in the world. I saw several of the women in Bree's coffee mugs start to cry at this. They were all wives of cops working, retired, or dead. A couple of the men may have shed a tear too. And I felt furious as I looked at the handcuff Parker left on me, depriving me of the opportunity to say goodbye to my wife in person. Claire came by that evening. She managed to get to me as one of her patients, and the guards, as far as I could judge, did not feel hostility towards me. They simply followed orders. This session went a little better than the previous ones, and it was nice that someone shared my grief. Larry couldn't make it that night because he had to be there for me at the wake. He recorded everything on his iPhone by simply turning on the record and placing the phone in the top pocket of his jacket, with the lens facing out. I saw it the next day when Larry came over. After talking and watching the video, he got down to business. "Rob, I have a lead. It might not work out, but I have to check. If you don't hear from me for a couple of days, don't worry until you see that I've been brought here to you." "What's the clue?" "I won't tell you, Rob. It's too dangerous. Hell, after what happened to you, I now wear body armor while I do this." "Come on, Larry, what could be more dangerous? I'm already in the hospital." I grumbled. "You could be dead, Rob. We just buried Bree. I can't lose you too, a brother from another family." 3 days later, the Illinois State Police came into my room and the handcuffs were removed. "Captain Robert Elliott, I'm Lieutenant Sam Reynolds, Illinois State Police, Criminal Investigations Division. Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" he asked, removing the handcuffs. "We want to discuss your attack and see if you can identify your attacker. We think this is connected to the murder of your wife and another person, and we've heard, well, some disturbing rumors surrounding the case." I rubbed my wrist, careful not to snag the Ivs, and suggested that he close the door and stay for a while, which brought back a pleasant, if sad, memory of a character from an old computer game, Larry, and I played as Children Deckard Cain from Diablo. Over the next hour, I told everything I knew, every clue, every detail, except for the names and direct involvement of Sean, Sharon, and Larry. It was obvious that I had inside sources, and they probably suspected that I was not telling exactly how I got the information from Brian and Bill at breakfast that morning. But given that I was well respected in the department, I might have had a dozen sources. Everyone knew that this case was everyone's top priority. After my story and reflection, it seems they no longer considered me a suspect. Considering that I was in Atlanta during the events, I should not have been considered as such from the beginning. "I can't say who, but we actually have a suspect in your assassination attempt," Reynolds admitted. "He is still free. We also think that he is not the one who gave the orders. There is someone higher up, but we don't have enough data there yet." He paused. "We are looking for your shooter. This is certainly the same man who killed your wife and Thornton, or at least used the same weapon. We'll catch this bastard. You have the support of local forces, state police, and I know your boss is thinking about bringing in federal agencies to at least help. The security at your door has doubled. Their duties have changed. Now it is your protection. We fear that this person might try again, or that the person giving the orders will send someone else. We find many victims on the streets who seem to be connected to this. Someone covering their tracks." I thought about it. "How many victims?" I asked. 10 at the moment. "So we think someone is cleaning up the evidence. Mostly small fish, but surprisingly, we got a couple of serious figures. At a minimum, this will slightly reduce the production of illegal substances in Chicago for a while." I was thinking about it after they left, and I was still thinking about it when Claire walked in the door for the next session. Larry came every 3 days, but called every day. Claire came every 2 days. And with most police officers ordered to stay away due to the investigation, I was hungry for information over the next 2 weeks. Claire has set a schedule of every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Larry showed up at random times, so I was surprised when I was finishing my Friday session with Claire and Larry walked into the room. He asked Claire to stay. "I didn't want to tell you this before until I was sure, Rob. The final check ended 2 hours ago, but I didn't want to interrupt the session with Dr. Claire." He nodded at her. "He's dead, Rob. The guys found him. Yesterday, they confirmed the identity of the shooter and went to capture him at night. They found him dead, but they also found his weapon. Today, it was confirmed that this is the same weapon that was used to shoot you and kill Thornton and Bree. Rob, this is Wyatt Johnson's service revolver." "Who is Wyatt Johnson?" asked Claire. Johnson was a young cop, fresh out of the academy. He was shot and killed by a guy high on a controlled substance related to Thornton last year. The most likely place my wife and Thornton would have crossed paths was when she was shopping for a dress for a funeral. But his service revolver was recovered at the scene. As far as I know, It should have been either in the armory or in the evidence locker. How could it have been used for 2 other murders and an attempt on my life? Some of yours are dirty, Rob. Someone with serious influence who can pull off these things. And it's very dirty. I didn't tell you, but someone is cleaning up the organization, removing many low and mid-level individuals, most of whom were key to the investigation, Larry confirmed. As I already said, this someone is very dirty and is trying to cover his tracks. It was a long and difficult 3 weeks in the hospital. It's been a month since Bree died. When I was discharged, one of the guards said that Parker wanted to see me. Although I was extremely angry with him, he was still from Homeland Security and I needed to cooperate. When I got to Michigan Avenue and walked into the BIA office, I asked to see Parker. Most of the people present recognized me. I saw sympathy and concern, but not from Parker. When he came out of his office and led me inside, his face remained hard and unfriendly. Although he was still not friendly, his attitude became less hostile. He discussed my position in the department and finally accepted that I was no longer a suspect. However, he added that I would remain on paid leave for 3 to 6 months while further investigation and my rehabilitation were underway. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but at least it was something. Well, did the DCI State Police help? Or the feds? I asked when the conversation began to come to an end. This question seemed to shock Parker. DCI? They are not investigating this case, as far as I know. And the FBI is too busy with a series of murders of small merchants to assist in the investigation of your wife's murder. When did you hear about any DCI involvement? He asked in surprise. Oh, they came to my room in the hospital. Funny, I thought you knew that. They just officially removed the handcuffs from me, I answered. This news seemed to greatly disturb him. I don't want DCI to interfere in this matter. Who called them? Parker clearly lost his composure. Well, I have things to do. Don't get lost, okay? I said, leaving his office. His excitement was remarkable. He seemed to want this case to be his career triumph and didn't want anyone else, especially DCI, to take the credit for it. Since it was still early, I called and made an urgent appointment with Claire. She became an anchor for me in this storm raging around me. The session went well, although it became difficult to speak as I began discussing the trauma of losing Bree, her betrayal, and the attempt on my life. I don't know what to do. Technically, I could retire early and give it all up. It quote as hard to think about going back to work on anything other than this, and I'm not allowed to do that. I know I'll be off duty for at least 4 months before I can return, and that's not fair to my team or my lieutenant, Sharon Harper, who is taking my place. They are now working on cases that I am not involved with, and Sharon has to prove that she can cope with my responsibilities under the most severe test. I just don't know how I can go back. I know they'll want me back, but it would hurt Sharon's career, and I don't want that. Rob, you need to focus on what you want. You have demonstrated this ability throughout your life and career. Find the confidence you already have. Oh, look at the time. I need to get to dinner with my daughter, Claire replied. Listen, doctor, this is my first evening out of the hospital, and for the first time in a month, I felt real hunger. How about I treat you and your daughter to dinner? Well, I don't think that's a good idea. Besides, I will need to pick up my daughter. Everything is fine. Imagine it as a continuation of therapy at my expense and with my sparkling company. So where, approximately, would you pick it up? Well, we're not far from Fulton Market. I think we could meet somewhere nearby. You Slaughterhouse excellent Italian cuisine. I always try to get their margarita pizza when I'm in Fulton Market in the evening. Do you and your daughter like pizza? Claire laughed. Oh yes, we know Slaughterhouse. Are you by any chance talking to my daughter? Because you're suggesting her favorite restaurant sounds like a conspiracy. Having promised to meet there in 2.5 hours, we parted ways. I returned to the Marriott. I had already been notified and my room items were packed and ready. I checked in again as I wasn't sure if I could handle the house and got up to clean up. I had nearly exhausted my 2.5 hour grace period when, clean and neatly dressed for a casual dinner, I arrived at the Mesalo parking lot in an Uber. Despite the fatigue, I felt pretty good. Physical therapy clearly had its results. I reserved a table, but barely had time to sit down when Claire and little Claire, about 13, came up. I stood up and waved to them. Rob, this is my daughter, Emily. Emily, this is Captain Rob Elliott of the Chicago Police Department. He recently lost his wife and just got out of the hospital today, so please be patient if he seems tired, okay? I shook Emily's hand, noticing that Claire was dressed almost identically to one of her hospital visits, a cream blouse and a knee-length skirt. When you came in, I thought I saw your mother and a miniature version of her. So your name is E. Claire? I joked. Claire glanced at me and then turned to Emily. After a moment, they looked at each other and burst out laughing. Did my mother tell you that my father gave me this nickname? Emily laughed. I froze in surprise, but soon began to laugh too. Everything moved on. While I did order a margarita pizza, Emily wanted a vegetarian pizza, and Claire asked if she could order the pumpkin ravioli. I smiled and nodded, also ordering grigliata mista as an appetizer for everyone, porcini mushroom risotto on the side, and a bottle of wine for Claire and me. She smiled and visibly relaxed. Dinner is my payment for the company of two beautiful women, your professional therapy, and your friendship during this dark period of my life. Order what you want. Over the next hour, I realized what Claire's life was like. She lost her husband 4 years ago when he was drafted into Afghanistan. In civilian life, he was a school counselor. What can I say? He was obsessed with the desire to serve and help people. I found this fascinating when we met at the University of Illinois at Champaign, where I was an undergraduate student. Losing him was very difficult. Although we mentioned my condition in passing, Claire tried to steer the conversation toward topics unrelated to my problems. At first, this annoyed me, but I soon realized that for the first time since returning home, I was smiling both internally and externally and again enjoying the simple pleasures of life, food and communication. It was the first good evening since my return to Chicago. And then my phone beeped. I looked at the screen and saw a message from Larry. You're in danger. Run and hide immediately. Seeing this, I immediately stood up and called the waitress. The bill, please, I asked. Claire looked at me in surprise, shocked by the abruptness. Claire, it was Larry. We need to leave now. I'll call him in a minute. Do you have a car? She nodded. Go ahead, take Emily and wait for me at the entrance. They quickly ran out, with fear on Claire's face and surprise on Emily's face. After paying, I hurried outside and got into the car as soon as Claire pulled up. I don't know what's going on yet, Rob, but I'll take you to my place and we'll figure it out there, she said. I nodded and called Larry, but he didn't answer. Then I called Sean. 5 rings later, I heard a voice. Hello, Sobs. Rob, is that Sobs you? I heard the voice of Lisa Hallowell. Lisa, what's happened? Why didn't Sean answer? I asked. Oh, Rob, she burst into tears. A moment later, I heard her drop the phone and scream. Later, I heard another voice. Rob, is it you? Sharon asked. Sharon, what's happening? Now I am really worried. He's dead, Rob. Sean was killed 3 hours ago. They had a huge fight in management, and Sean came out furious. Someone shot him in the parking lot. There are no eyewitnesses at this time. Are you with Lisa now? God, I need to go there. You can't, Rob. The one who killed Sean was from the department. And even though everyone knows it's not you, your name was part of what Sean yelled about during the fight before he left. Rob, you're probably in danger too. Where are you? I can send a couple of patrol cars. Bad idea. If it's someone from the department, he will listen to the radio broadcast, and sending cars will give out my location. It will only put good cops in further danger, I replied. Meanwhile, Claire arrived at a row of houses. I'll call you soon. There are other people with me, and I need to protect them. Bye, Sharon. Help Lisa and tell her, take care of yourself, Rob, and I will do my best, she said, and we hung up. I turned to Claire and asked the following question. Claire, do you have any weapons at home? Someone just killed my captain, and it's almost certainly related to the murder of my wife. I need something if they come for us, even for me. Sorry, Rob, I don't have any weapons at home. I never thought I needed it and didn't want to have it. My husband had it, but well, I got rid of it. Claire, this is Chicago. The only places in the US that need it more are Baltimore and Detroit. You need a weapon. Without it, you will not be able to protect yourself, especially if the threat comes from within those who are supposed to protect. Realizing that Claire would not be able to help us, I called Larry, but he again did not answer. After leaving a message asking me to get a gun and come here, I began to worry about my old friend. He always answered the phone. I turned to Claire, and we began discussing how to protect her and Emily. Claire, what do we have here to protect ourselves? And is there some place you could hide until Larry or the police arrive? I can hide in the bathroom and climb into the bathtub. I also have a baseball bat that we can take with us. There's plenty of room for Mom and me, Emily said. Just as I was about to do this, my phone rang. An unknown number appeared on the screen. I replied, "Hello?" The voice on the other end of the line was hoarse, as if after a coughing attack. "I only need you. A woman shouldn't die. Just do as I say, and she and her daughter will be safe." Fine. We agreed. What do you want? I asked. Strip down to your underwear and go out alone, without a weapon. When you're on the sidewalk, turn right and walk to the end of the block. It's simple, the voice answered. And then? I asked. Well, you're having a bad day. Maybe he'll get better. But probably not, the voice said, chuckling softly at the end. Okay, just don't hurt anyone else. And I heard him hang up. Claire turned white as a sheet when she heard the conversation on my phone. He's going to kill you, right? She asked. I looked at her and then at Emily, smiling. No, you don't need to worry about me. You need to think about yourself and Claire, I said, looking at Emily. Gathering her courage, she smiled back. Besides, this is what I do. I protect those around me. Turning to Claire, I added, maybe in the end, that's what hurts me the most about losing Bree. I wasn't there to protect her, before or after she died. I started to undress. When I was left in my underwear, Emily started laughing, somehow finding something funny in the situation. Boxers with Superman. Seriously, Captain Elliot? She asked, barely holding back her laughter. Even Claire made fun of me, laughing too, although her amusement soon gave way to a return to harsh reality. It was my late wife who bought them. I always tried to please her with clothes, and she thought they were sexy, I explained. After that, Claire and Emily ran upstairs. I left my socks on, put my boots back on, and opened the door, stepping out into the crisp autumn air. Pulling my socks higher, I turned on the phone, dialed 911, and turned the volume down to 0 so I couldn't hear the answer back. Speaking quietly before leaving, I said, "This is Captain Robert Elliott of the Chicago Police Department. I expect to be killed by an unknown assailant in the next few minutes. Make sure a recording of this call is preserved for use in the investigation of my murder, the murder of Captain Sean Hallowell of the Chicago Police Department, the murder of my wife Brianna Elliott, the murder of Charles Thornton, and possibly the murder of Trooper Wyatt Johnson, as well as the death of the man who shot me a month ago. I'll try to keep talking and providing clues as best I can." With these words, I went outside. I stopped on the sidewalk for about 30 seconds. It is not easy to go towards your death. I knew that if everything went as it seemed, in a few days a bagpiper would be playing in my honor. This thought gave some comfort, but did not make me happy. I've heard too many bagpipes over the past year, although I knew that even if not for me, then for Sean they would sound heavy, and Larry hated them. He will have to represent my family again and thank the people who came. I started walking. I walked 2 houses before I reached the end of the block. There was no one in sight, so after standing still for a while, I crossed the street and continued on to the next block. As I passed the second house, where the block was poorly lit, and a large SUV was parked on the side of the road, blocking my view of the sidewalk. I heard the voice again. "That's enough, Elliot. Okay, you seem to be following my instructions, even the ones I intentionally made vague," the voice said. He was familiar. Even distorted, I recognized him. "Parker, damn it. You're a cop," I said loud enough for the phone to record it. "Why are you doing this?" "I couldn't let them continue their investigation, Elliot. I couldn't let you continue. I couldn't just sit and wait for the investigation to be completed. If they kept digging, you or one of your friends would definitely find out. I made mistakes, left too many traces." Hallowell understood everything. His mistake was that he didn't tell anyone before confronting me. Blessings of service, full honors if I pull the trigger on my head. Fuck this. The guys from Birmingham who helped me get settled were waving too much money at me. I love my life to give it all up. If I hadn't done it, someone else would have done it. My wife was a fluke at first, he continued. When the guy killed Johnson, it was a mistake. We sold to the wrong guy, and Johnson was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But getting to your wife, Thornton did it himself. He put something in her coffee when she was buying a dress or something like that. He practically did it against her will in the store, but he made sure that she became dependent on our product. She immediately became addicted. Thornton told her that we would kill you if she tried to refuse. In the end, that's why she was killed. She was trying to catch Thornton. She set up cameras in your bedroom, trying to record him leaking information to help you shut down the whole operation. That's why you got a search warrant the day before I returned, right? This gave you the opportunity to cover your tracks and take back the records. Exactly, detective. I tried to blame it all on you, but it was a losing bet from the start. You are too correct. Yes, I already heard that. Are you going to tell me something I don't already know? No. We stood looking at each other for several seconds, which seemed like an eternity. On your knees, Elliot. I will not touch women. They don't know anything important. But you, on your knees. I slowly knelt down. From this position, and where he was, my chances of doing anything were practically zero. I was a good cop once, Elliot. That was all I ever wanted to serve and protect. Everything seemed black and white then. I don't know where I took a wrong turn, but it's too late now. The train has started, and it won't stop. I need to tie up all the loose ends and pray. You are one of those ends, and you are the reason I am in trouble. We both know how this will end, but I will send flowers. I looked straight ahead, remembering my life. Bree, Larry, Sean, Lisa, my parents, Sharon, and my team, Claire and Emily. I thought about the moments that mattered and how in my last moments I thought about the first time I held Bree in my arms, looked into her eyes, and heard her say, "I love you." I gasped, remembering this, and said out loud the words that sounded in my memory. "I love you too, Bree." A shot rang out. I braced myself for the feeling of fire, for the pain that was to follow. I knelt, waiting, and suddenly I heard a dull sound. The ringing in my ears still distorted my perception of sounds. I didn't hear anyone approach. Then I heard a voice. DRT. "Larry?" I looked at the man standing next to me with disbelief. I was hoping to get closer just to hurt him. But he was about to shoot Rob. "Sorry." Larry came closer, sweating in the almost freezing cold. At first, he didn't even notice that I was shaking, almost completely naked, wearing only my boxers. DRT justified shot. After a moment, Larry suddenly relaxed, looked at me, and smiled. "Superman, Rob? Seriously?" he said with a grin. The weight of the world lifted from my shoulders, and I began to cry again until I saw the first patrol cars begin to arrive. I stood in front of the mirror, remembering the events of last night. Larry invited me to celebrate. I was excited but nervous. Larry helped me with a tailcoat with long tails, which was much more elegant than his simple tuxedo. Even after I left the police force and joined Larry as a private investigator, I knew that I would again find myself facing the sea in blue, those who came to the ceremony. Through the doors came the muffled noise of waiting guests. "Thank you, brother. Thank you for everything. For your friendship, for being my best man twice, for saving my life, for being my partner again, and especially thank you for keeping those dancers Brian ordered from getting close to me. Claire would be horrified if something happened and it got out, I told Larry. Brother, I like the sound of that. After all these years, it's like we really are brothers, Rob, and you have nothing to thank me for. I love you, man. Always loved. Besides, you're going to kill me now, Larry answered calmly. Will I kill? Why? What? Don't tell me. Did you lose your rings? Please tell me it's not so, I begged. I didn't lose it, Rob. I just left it. Don't worry, I sent Brian to get them. They even gave him a patrol car to get him through the traffic. Brian was supposed to lead people to their places, Larry. Oh my God, I can't believe it, I complained, nervous. At that moment, Brian rushed into the room, still wearing dark glasses to hide his reddened eyes. Now you owe me, Larry, and I still need to get dressed. I have 5 minutes, he exhaled, handing over the gold ring and his keys to Larry. Don't panic, Rob. You either marry this woman or I will. And even though I'm a handsome guy and an incredible man, for some reason she wants you and not me. The woman may be smart, but she has terrible taste, Larry said calmly, turning to Brian. Hurry up, Brian. We're having a wedding, and Rob can't be late. Looking in the mirror, I thought again about the time I was in a similar situation, still grieving for my Bree, who passed away just over a year ago. In a whisper, I mentally addressed her. Bree, if you can hear me, I forgave you a long time ago. I will always love you and miss you. I hope that Claire and Emily will be an acceptable replacement for you. She is a new wife, not a replacement. This is more love and joy in a life that would be empty after your death, and the new daughter we always dreamed of. As if the wind was whispering in my thoughts, I heard her voice, remembering our vows on our wedding day. I will love you with all my heart, with all my soul, until death do us part. And then I will love you after that. These memories, or perhaps a ghostly voice, echoed in my head. Calm, I turned to the door and waved to Larry and Brian, who was still buttoning the trousers of his dress uniform. Let's go, guys. It's time. We need to be there before the bride, I said, leaving the room towards my future in the Windy City. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.